What happened back there?
I don't care.
Hey, I've got an idea. Let's rock talk.
Hello, everybody. This is Lord Magicus, and today I'm going to talk about the modern 5K I played in Philadelphia at the Star City Games Open. The weekend main event was a Pioneer event, but on Sunday they ran a modern 5K, and that is what I decided to play in. Philly is not too far away from me, so it's a reasonable drive. I don't have to get a hotel or anything, so those are great events for me to play in. So I try to play in them whenever possible, so this was a good opportunity. So I decided, signed up for that. Obviously, I'm going to play Merfolk because that's kind of what we do. And what's the point of owning shiny cards if we're not going to play them, right? So decided we were going to do that. And I did a little tournament prep as usual. And one of the things I always recommend if you're going to be playing a long event like that, have something to drink and have something to snack on throughout the day. And eat breakfast. Oh my god, it's so important. You don't want to go and feel hungry all day long while you're trying to focus and playing magic cards. Just miserable. We played 8 rounds of Modern, and I ate breakfast before I left the house. It was about an hour drive there. I got there. I left myself at least a half hour of time between when I got there and when the tournament started, so being early, of course, is always good. I don't like being there too early, but I want to give myself just enough time where I'm comfortable. So I have some time to, in case of an emergency or there's traffic or something, but also I don't want to be sitting around for like an hour. So you gotta, plan accordingly. So know how long it's going to take you to get there. Definitely, if you're driving, know what the traffic's going to be like and what your route's going to be beforehand. Also take care of putting gas in your car or like going out and getting your snacks or whatever the day before. Don't wait and don't do it like the morning that you're leaving. But it's terrible. And if you can, try to make sure you get some sleep. And it's one of the hardest things to do is to play when you're tired all day. So I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's always worth reiterating. A lot of the tournament prep you want to do before you play a single match of Magic. And one other thing you can do that really helps you is create a sideboard guide for your deck. So if you're unsure throughout the day, or sometimes even just as a sanity check, you're allowed to have a page of sideboard notes, so you may as well use them. I always type them up and print them out and put them in the deck box beforehand, so it makes it nice and easy for me when I'm there. Just take a quick look at it. Even if I'm sure that I know what it is, sometimes I'll look at it anyway just to make sure that I'm confident in what I'm doing, that I didn't just mess up or forget about something. So having all that ahead of time, very useful. So that's, like the tournament prep itself is kind of useful. I did play this list a few days beforehand, and we did not do very well in our league with it for a few different reasons, but you know what, that's fine, because I still felt like the cards that we were playing were correct. Take a look at the deck list here. Let me get this up on screen so you can see it. So this is the list that we were playing. One thing that you will notice is that there are no Silvergill Adepts in it. Instead, we opted to play Spreading Seas in the deck. In the main deck, in the space of where Silvergill would normally be. I played 3. I'm not sure if 3 is the right number. It could be like 2. It could be 4. That's something to experiment with. My day, because of my matches, I didn't really need C's, but there definitely could be an argument for like any number between 2 and 4 is reasonable, I think. So, other than that, I did play with 2 Rishadan dock hands, and I felt like having extra things to do on turn 1 was important, and dock hand is something that does not die to like Wrenn and 6, which I also thought is important. So having something, with 2 toughness is great. The Natural Island Walk is also kind of nice in there, and its ability is not irrelevant. There were like 1 or 2 times where I was able to use its ability, and it helped. I played 2 Harbinger of the Tides in my deck, only 3 Sphaloon, and I'll say that I don't think that I missed the 4th one. However, it definitely is not wrong to play 4, so that's kind of up to you. There are going to be a lot of matches, I think, where Sphaloon is something where you like can consider siding it out. Like if you're up against, say, Hammers, I actually don't think Svalun is that great in that match because they're trying to kill you very quickly, and Svalun is a card that's trying to win you the game if the game's going to go longer. She's like really great against control, really great against like Fury decks, not so great against decks like, Living End or Hammers where you're like the clock is on really fast and they're like trying to sort of combo kill you. Yeah, it's similar to how we like side out True Name, Nemesis, and Legacy. I don't like having 3 drops in against decks where I need to go like underneath them. So, like the card advantage from her attacking is nice, but usually more often than not, you're gonna die before you really get cards going off of her. So for that reason, like if you're expecting a lot of those kind of decks, then you can definitely consider maybe 3. Um, I mean, there's also a lot of decks, like I said, Murktide is probably one where having 4 is actually pretty good because you will go to a later game against them, especially if you're jamming Harbinger. So it was just something I wanted to try, and yeah, I think this is playable, but I don't know that it's necessarily correct, but it's not. I don't think it's wrong either. So it's definitely worth trying again. The other thing here that I'll say, I put 2 Force in the main deck. This very easily could have been 2 Subtlety, and I don't think it would have made a huge difference no matter what. But yeah, you put whatever you want in these 2 slots. It's really there because I wanted more space in my sideboard for stuff. So, I mean, it could also just maybe we like have Harbinger in this slot, but I like having either Subtlety or Force in the main, but whichever one changes like from week to week. So I am personally just a fan of, the Force of Negation as a card, so I tend towards it sometimes because it makes me feel more comfortable. But to be honest, we also have Hex Catcher, so against a lot of like the Rhino decks and the Living End decks, we don't necessarily need Force as much. Force is still really good against like Ren and 6, so I would much rather have Force than Subtlety, so that's one reason that I kind of push towards Force. However, there are definitely going to be times where like Subtlety is better. Like if you're up against Murktide, like the 2 Subtlety in the main will do a lot more for you than the 2 Force as well. You might end up siding them out regardless, but still in that game 1, it actually could make a difference. So yeah, it really just depends like how you want to hedge it. Either one I think is correct for that. What is not arguable though, you need to have 4 Dismember. 4 Dismember is a huge advantage here. And as we will see, this card makes or breaks like so many matches, and it looks scary to have this many Dismembers and think, oh my god, how am I going to win if I am losing that much life to cast all these Dismembers? Trust me, you will win. Dismember is amazing at what it does. So play all 4 copies, and we'll see as we're going through how this is relevant. And then our mana base here, we always want 4 Caverns at this point. Like, this is just necessary, I think. I have 3 Mutavaults. I know some people have been playing with 4, and I am just really, I don't like getting color screwed with this, and even with 3, sometimes it still happens, and it's a scary prospect, but I think 3 is the number I'm personally comfortable with. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to play 4, but I don't know. I prefer to like have, the extra blue sources so that I can actually cast stuff and are more often. So the Oboro is in the deck in order to help with Mutavault, and I did use it at least once to help make double blue with the Muta, so Oboro definitely mattered. You could play a Manamo if you want to. I chose to have 10 islands just in case I ran into Blood Moons, which was a possibility. So, yeah, being immune to Blood Moon has its advantages. You could play 9 islands if you want pretty safely. 8 is really kind of pushing your luck because then if you go up against Moon, like, it's going to be way less consistent for you to have islands versus, like, being on 10. So, you could push your mana base a little bit more if you wanted to. I think having 2 Ottawaras was a very good choice. There were a lot of times where I did want to use this as the ability instead of the land, so being able to hold it in my hand, or if I need to like play 1 in order to get to the mana for the second one, that was also fine. So But I did not at any point have trouble with, having both of these in hand and needing them both for mana. So it's free to include in your mana base. You absolutely should have one. I personally think two is a good number. And then we have a lot of standard stuff in the sideboard here: Subtlety, Force, Chalice. I have the other two Harbingers here. Um, I was trying Mistcaller because I thought I wanted something that would be good against creativity and helpful against Yawgmoth. It does a few things. Again, against some of those decks, like counters like Quarter Calling and Eldritch Evolution, can stop like undying creatures from coming back. It stops creativity from putting a thing into play. It stops persist from putting a thing into play. It also is really good against Living End because it's something that they don't have actual removal to get rid of for the most part. The best they can do is like Brazen Borrower to bounce it, I think, or Otawara to bounce it. But that Force of Vigor is not going to be getting rid of it. So yeah, just hard counters are Living End, so they don't get any of their stuff back. That and two engineered explosives, and I chose to play this card because I wanted something against the HammerTime deck, and this actually I think is really good against them. And I did play it, and it did what it was supposed to do. Uh, Basically, this card reads: two colorless, one blue, destroy all one mana value permanents. And the thing that it has as an advantage over the Ratchet Bomb is that your opponent is not going to see it coming. Or if you play Ratchet Bomb and you take it up to one, they're not going to be inclined to play into you blowing up all of their board. Whereas engineered explosives, they will very easily like tap out for something. You just have to stay alive, for one turn, which is not too hard to do with stuff like Trickster. You can like tap stuff down, make some blocks. Um, you can just throw things in front of the bus, that's fine, and then just blow up all the one drops, and then you hit stuff like Sigarda's Aid, the Shadow Spear, Colossus Hammer. Yeah, it's really, really good. Now, we will look at. Yeah, I don't think there's a huge difference between this and Bomb, but I've personally liked the surprise factor a little bit more than the versatility of being able to um, try to tick Bomb up. You do have to hold up a little bit more mana sometimes, but I think for the most part, like if you're playing this card, you want to just blow it up immediately anyway. So there's not a whole lot of scenarios where I'd want to actually try to get my opponent. Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second. So there we go. That's the list that we were playing. I thought it's a pretty good list, and despite the lack of Silverkill Adept, I was confident that this was going to be what I wanted to play. So round one, I'm playing against Yawgmoth, um, and I did not do very well against that deck. Yawgmoth is very difficult. I lost 0-2. I don't think I had Dismember at all against that guy, so without Dismember, basically impossible, I think. Dismember is a way that you can definitely like steal a game from them, so it's helpful in that regard. I think Nikachu doesn't see Yawgmoth as that bad, but I don't know. My experience playing against the Yawgmoth deck has been absolutely miserable, and every single time that I've played against it, they have just had a million mana dorks into, you know, there's 12 ways to get like Yawgmoth into play between the four chords, like evolutions, and also like Yawgmoth itself. So they can't like just cast Yawgmoth, and that's really bad. Um, and there's also Grist, which is a huge problem because if they like play Grist in turn two, it can be very difficult to get back in the game against that, because they can blow up your critical stuff. If you can land Sfeilun, it can try to like slow them down so they can't ping away all your stuff. However, what will usually happen is they'll just go after Sfeilun first and then just kill the rest of your board. And they are totally fine with just throwing away their life total to make sure you don't have creatures in play, and they do, because once that happens, you are not coming back from it. You are not getting anything on board at that point. They will find their combo pieces faster than you can actually present a clock for the most part. So if Yawgmoth is in play, you are in a lot of trouble. And if it lasts more than one turn, like you've basically just lost the game. You need to have that Dismember in play immediately. And I am not confident that I can necessarily fix this matchup in any good way. I think the Dismember definitely helps a lot. It can slow them down a lot, especially if you kill the first mana dork they play. That can buy you a little bit of time. If you have a fast enough clock, maybe you can do something. Um, I believe my sideboard plan involved taking Spreading Seas out versus them, but I'm wondering if maybe I should try a plan where I leave it in, because Island Walk was definitely really relevant versus them in one of the matches I played versus it. Um, but then Yawgmoth being able to kill my Tide Shaper was, or taking away Island Walk was just devastating. I needed a way to keep Island Walk, and with Tide Shaper being vulnerable, I just couldn't do it. So there wasn't really good hope of trying to push their damage that way once they have like all their Wall of Roots and their Young Wolves and Stranglegeists and whatnot in play. It's very hard to get damage through. So I don't know. Maybe there's some possibility that like Spreading Seas is supposed to stay in versus that deck. You're probably not going to mana screw them because they have too many mana dorks like Ignoble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise. So even if you like hit their actual lands, they still have the creatures that can make both green and black, and the Wall of Roots makes them green mana. Cord can help them find more stuff too. So I'm not sure if that's a good enough plan, but that's something I might try in the future to fix it. But I don't think it's a very good match, and it was not a good way to start the day. And regardless, I lost that one. So it's hard to start that way, but sometimes that's how it is. So don't let yourself get disheartened at the start just because of that. Anyway, I go to round 2, and I am playing against the HammerTime deck. So he was playing the Blue Splash for Spell Pierce. However, he was also smart and did not fetch out Hollowed Fountains, because he knows that Island Walk is really dangerous. I had a very, very close match versus this deck. I lost it 1-2. Unfortunately, we got to a point in game 3 where both of us were extremely close to just winning at any given point. I think I had him like within like 1 damage of dying, but I could not quite get there. And then he was able to stabilize it just enough, and then found a second hammer with his Sigarda's aid to push through lethal, and my lonely Harbinger of the Tides was not enough to deal with everything. So I died with it being exactly at 0 after that, and it was rough, but it really just came down to just top decking after a few turns, like who was going to draw something first, and he eventually ended up drawing. So I don't think that this match is actually that bad. I think we have a much better game than you might first think. Especially Harbinger and Trickster are both very helpful. Spreading Seas and Tide Shaper being able to blow up the Urza Saga is also very helpful. And Engineered Explosives, I did play it in this match, and it did stop them from killing me. I managed to survive the initial assault, I believe, in game 3. And played Engineered Explosives and blew up both Hammer and Sigarda's aid before he untapped. And I think this was important. If they have some 1-drops in the deck too, I think like Giver of Runes. So, um, you know, just don't get cute with the explosives. You do want to like use it before they find a way to to protect their board. They do have some cards that are worth worrying about. Blacksmith Skill is one that I often consider. I don't know if I can pull. I will pull this up in the editing. Yeah, because it gives a permanent hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and if it's an artifact creature, it gets +2/+2. But the important thing is they can use it to protect either Sigarda's aid or like the hammer. So if you don't do it when they're tapped out, sometimes if you try to like say wait until their turn and try to wait till they attack and get cute with it, so they can't play any more hammers or anything, you risk them being able to draw into Blacksmith Skill and destroy your or I'm sorry, to give their permanent indestructible so it doesn't actually die. So Yeah, probably going to be the hammer because at that point it should be equipped to something. So don't get cute with the explosives. And the same thing with like Ratchet Bomb. If there's a point where you can crack it safely and blow everything up, do it when they're tapped out. Yeah, it's worth just not getting greedy and making sure that you don't get like surprise blown out and lose the game. Because that kept the game going for like another like 6 or 7 turns after that happened. So it was like the explosives bought us so much time to find an answer to like actually push through damage to win. So it was exactly what I needed because it stopped, like I said, the early attempt to combo off. But sadly, like it ended up coming down to top decks after several turns, and you managed to find it first. So lost round two. It was not a very good start to my day. I was, yeah, starting to feel it a little bit, but you know what? I was surprised because all of the people I played against throughout the day, they were surprisingly positive about Merfolk. They were happy to see it, and a lot of them were aware of Nikachu and John's performance, both of them making the top 8 at the beta draft. So, and a lot of the hype on Merfolk in the room was actually pretty noticeable. Like every person I talked to was, very happy to see Merfolk. I think, even when we were the ones winning. So yeah, it's good to see there's some positivity because there wasn't always that. A lot of times in the past, like people would just like trash talk Merfolk, but there was none of that today. It was all everybody was in love with Hexcatcher, so very good addition to the deck. All right, so we go to round 3 here, and I was up against Dredge. So I think what's funny is there were 3 Merfolk players that actually were in this tournament, and both my round 1 and round 2 opponent ended up playing against both me and one other Merfolk player. So it's interesting because I think the Hammer player ended up playing Merfolk round 1 and 2, and then the Yawgmoth player played against Merfolk later on in this event. But out of there, I found that interesting anyway. But yeah, round 3, I'm up against Dredge, and I'm like, there's no way I can possibly like win this because it's Dredge and I have no graveyard hate. What am I gonna do against this deck? Well, I what happened is I lost game 1, pretty miserably. Game 2, I found a Force of Negation on Life from the Loam, and that was the critical thing that helped me win the game. So my opponent fetched in a certain manner where they needed to resolve that Life from the Loam in order to get lands back so they could cast the rest of the spells in their hand, and he could not do it. I forced the Life from the Loam, it got exiled. The exile part kind of tripped him up. I don't think he realized that at first, that force exile stuff. So when Life from the Loam went away, he was not able to cast stuff for the rest of game 2, and I was able to kill him before he could do anything. And then in game 3, both of us ended up mulliganing to 5. And I believe the hand I kept was something like land, Ether Vial, 2 creatures, and a Force of Negation. And he did not keep a good hand. So even though, he was on the play for game 3, his hand basically consisted of him just like hard casting a prized amalgam, while I ended up just drawing more creatures to put into play off the Ether Vial. Eventually I found a second land. And I ended up with just a ton of pressure, and he had like nothing going on as far as his plan was concerned, so very easily able to kill him. Because he had the island in order to cast the prized amalgam, obviously island walk was really dangerous, so there was no concern about the amalgam blocking, so I was able to kill him before he could actually do anything. So sometimes even the really really bad pairing, you can still win it if you try and get lucky. The Dredge was a match where Nikachu said, he's not going to play Graveyard Hate, and he's just going to say, screw it. I'm just going to throw my luck into the wind and hope that that's going to be good enough. But that's what we did here. And I was able to win Dredge. And I'm really surprised by that because, like I said, I did side in Mist Collar, but I don't think I drew it until like the last turn, like right before I killed him, and it didn't do anything. So That's sort of graveyard hate, I guess, but it stops like one thing on like one turn. It's not like Relic or Hearse where it actually controls anything. It's more of a speed bump to Dredge than anything else. So we didn't have like Cage or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know. We still managed to beat Dredge, and that was surprising. The power force of negation sometimes was just enough. So that got us on the leader or on the board here. So we go 1-2 finally, and then we're going into round 4, and I got paired against Murktide. And let me tell you something about this list. Murktide has very little hope against 4 Dismembers and all the Harbinger of the Tides off Cavern of Souls. Our interaction versus them is fantastic. Dismember is great. It is amazing. If they play a creature in turn 1, you should just be dismembering it like all the time. I think that this card is amazing. You do have to be careful. Do not cast Dismember when they have blue mana up, because they will counterspell it, and then you will probably lose from losing 4 life for nothing, and they get to keep their creature to keep pressuring you. So be very careful about when you cast Dismember, but as long as they don't have blue up, you can cast Dismember. In game 1, be aware they might have Spell Pierce. They're almost definitely not going to keep it in for games 2 and 3, so you can be a little bit more aggressive with your Dismembers if they have, like, say, 1 blue up. Then feel free to test them on that, because they might just be holding up Mystical Dispute, which is not going to hit Dismember. But game 1, Spell Pierce is something to consider. So ideally, you want to try to cast Dismember when they have tapped out, or you know that they don't have a counter spell. So Dismembering Ragavan or Dismembering Dragon's Rage Channeler in turn 1 is an excellent way to get there. And like I said, Harbinger of the Tides is fantastic against them. You use Cavern of Souls to make it uncounterable, and then you can just flash it in on their own turn. The only kind of counterplay that they have to it is Dress Down, which can be scary, so please be aware of that. Like, if your hopes and dreams cannot rely entirely on Harbinger bouncing it if they have the Dress Down. Because the good thing is that if that is the case, the Harbinger will still be able to block the Murktide because it will lose flying. So there is that. So you probably won't die, but the Murktide won't get reset, and you might be in danger in the turn afterwards. So just something to be aware of. I think that I saw like 1 or maybe 2 Dress Downs, but yeah, it wasn't that much of a problem. We're just bringing in Chalice of the Void and Harbinger of the Tides for this match. And obviously, Spreading Season, Force of Negation are not very useful against them, but it's pretty easy swap, and the deck is very, very good against Murktide. So I 2-0'd the first Murktide in round 4. I played against Murktide in round 5, which I won 2-0. Pretty much everything the same applies. And in round 6, I also played against Murktide, which I won 2-1. He was able to win, I believe, game 2 because I had the 3rd Lightning Bolt when I was exactly at 3. So, I mean, sometimes, you steal games that way. But I believe that was the round where I beat him by casting 3 Dismembers. So yeah, and this is something you don't see happen. There was a match where I cast 3 Dismembers versus a Murktide deck, which is playing Lightning Bolts, and the key to victory was, in fact, paying 12 life in order to kill off 3 creatures. Actually, I didn't even kill 3 creatures that game, because the last Dismember, I remember I cast it when I was at 7 life, and the opponent had a 7/7 Murktide attacking me. Well, the thing is, I only have to pay 4 life to give the Murktide -5/-5, so the Murktide only hit me for 2, and then I only went down to 1 life, and then I was able to win the game. So, yeah, it was a really cool thing that definitely he did not see that play coming, but it's a hell of a line, and it worked. And I was able to win all 3 of the Murktide matches fairly easily, I'd say. Chalice was also important. One of the opponents was able to use engineered explosives on 0 to get rid of it. But the good thing is that because he blew it on 0, it meant I could play as many creatures as I wanted to without having to worry about EE on 2. So there is that. Chalice is equally devastating as well as all of the creatures, so it's kind of between a rock and a hard place. He kind of has to blow up the Chalice in order to be able to execute the rest of their game plan. But I mean, overloading the engineered explosives in that regard is definitely a really cool plan. So I think that this list is amazingly good against Murktide, especially we have all 4 Harbingers. So it's and all 4 of the dismembers on top of it. It's really hard to like be any better against it if we tried. So yeah, I expect that we do pretty well against it. I did see one of the Murktide decks at least had Blood Moon in the main deck, which they surveilled away. So I did not have Blood Moon cast against me all day, but so it was there, so it was a possibility. Um, so having the islands definitely helped because we could have gotten Blood Moon very easily. Did not happen, but it's out there, so be careful about it. And there were Furies boarded in against me, but I don't believe any of them actually ever got cast or resolved for that matter. So they don't have that many of them. Like I think they board in like 2, and it's difficult to find them. So, but it is a thing that you have to consider. So it's just something to keep in mind. That Sphaloon will help a little bit with that, so it's kind of nice. All right, well, winning 3 Murktides after that put us back at 4-2, which meant there was still a chance that we could go and get some money. So, round 7, I ended up playing against Yawgmoth. Oh, that was so rough. We lost game 1 to Yawgmoth. Game 2, I was able to play Tideshaper and turn one of the, I believe, a Blooming Marsh into an island, and that made the mana pretty awkward for my opponent. And he ended up not really doing anything that game, I think, because of that, and we ended up winning. So there was a way to steal that game, and it's another reason that maybe I consider Seas, because it seems unlikely that we can mana screw them, but that is one way that we can possibly try to fight it. So it worked that game. However, game 3, I just did not have enough pressure to. I believe he had I think 2 Yawgmoths in the game 3, and I killed one of them with Dismember. In response, he put a bunch of -1/-1 counters on my creatures, and then he was able to like cord for a second Yawgmoth. So there's not a whole lot I could do about that. Yeah, that match is really tough, and like I said, the more dismembers you have against that deck, the better you're going to do against it. But did not have enough dismembers in order to try to get there. So sadly, that was our 3rd loss. Since it was 8 rounds, I did decide to stick around and play the last round. However, my opponent did not show up for the last round. So he apparently had some sort of emergency. He had to leave, and so I immediately got a match win for that. Now, that said, my friend who was also playing in the event decided he was playing his last round as well, and his opponent also did not show up. So he got a match win, and since we were both there and we wanted to play a last round, we decided that for our last round we would just play our match against each other for fun. So he was actually playing like a Mardu Planeswalker deck, and we did play a match, and I was able to beat his deck 2-1. His deck had like Nahiri in it, being able to find Emrakul out of the deck. It had Karn in it. He's playing a bunch of like Wraths, Blood Moons, and Chalices. The Wraths were kind of annoying to deal with, but Blood Moon and Chalice don't really do anything against the deck, so he had to side those out. We're just having, Force of Negation and Subtlety are fantastic against a deck like that. It's basically just a control deck, except, it's just a Mardu control deck instead of like a, typical like blue-white version. They're just playing lots of Planeswalkers, so the Forces and the Subtleties will do a very good job at handling that. And yeah, he also has like Flagstones in the deck, and it's I used Spreading Seas a few times to like try to slow down his mana. Um, Cleansing Wildfire to help ramp up, because Wildfire on the flagstones is pretty brutal, because he gets to have the extra mana from the, you get to tap the flagstones for, one, and tap a red, and you blow up the flagstones. You get a land from the Wildfire, and you also get like another land. You get another planes from the flagstones, and you get to draw a card. Like, it's pretty good ramp. So I did have like I did force one of those in order to slow him down for the last game. So it was pretty good. So we did win actual 5 matches of Magic. We lost 3. It's not a bad result. I thought 2 of our losses were to Yawgmoth, and I'd say the first one was not close. The second time that I fought it, I think that it was not impossible to win that game if we had just drawn better towards the end. Maybe if I had a second Dismember when he put the other Yawgmoth in play or something like that, it could have been possible, but it was still really hard. So I don't necessarily anticipate that I'm beating a bunch of creature combo decks. So stuff like Goblins and Heliod Company and Yawgmoth are all in that category of creature combo, which things like Force of Negation and Hex Catcher are going to do basically dink against. So you just kind of have to accept that. Yeah, and Hammers was extremely close. Like, Hammers was a coin flip away from being a win. So, and we lost the Hammer deck, which I think was a very winnable match, and we won the Dredge match, which I think was a very losable match. So it kind of balances out in the end. But yeah, 3 Murktides was definitely very helpful to our record. Like I said, we were very good against it. I was prepared for a lot of other decks too, but if we're going to play Murktide all day, I'm fine with that. So now that was just our deck. However, there was one other Merfolk deck, which we will take a look at here. So this is mine. Here we go. And this was the other one. The other Merfolk deck that we are looking at here. This one actually came in 9th place. So I ended up, I believe, in 32nd place out of about 140 some people. This was the 9th place list, which I was really surprised to see employed a lot of the same ideas that I incorporated into my deck. You will notice there is no Silvergill Adept in this deck. Instead, he also chose to play Spreading Seas in the deck. Now, he played 4 Spreading Seas, and I only had 3. But he also had 3 Dismember, and I had 4. And I definitely think that he should have had the 4th Dismember. Like, that card is just way too powerful not to. But it does really look like Silvergill Adept wasn't really that necessary. Because, like, the 2 kind of successful Merfolk decks that were there didn't have that. There was a 3rd Merfolk deck that ended up losing out pretty early, and it did have Silvergill in it, so I don't know. Like, the more traditional one didn't succeed with he's also playing the 2 dock hands, having that as the extra 1-drop. The Magus of the Moon here, I think it's sort of like a troll inclusion. I mean, you can only really play it if you. He has the 3 fiery islets, and you could vial it in on 3 with Ether Vial. So, in playing Fiery Islet, he had to cut like an Otawara, an Island, and the Oboro. So, yeah, to have the red mana to play Magus, you have to make some concessions, and he only gets to play 9 islands. So there is a possibility that doing that is going to actually hurt him more than it's going to help. But it was, I mean, there in, I guess, an emergency, you could like use Cavern to cast it too. Then once you cast it, then you're turning off your own Caverns and Mutavaults. And I'm not, yeah, like, I don't normally like playing more than like 1 or 2 of these the groves or islets. Yeah. But he had 3 because he needed the red mana for Magus, I guess. And I don't know. I'm curious to know exactly how well that one of did for him. But I guess it was just kind of the Merfolk surprise element of Merfolk at play. So always keep him guessing. And then his sideboard is pretty similar. Like, you see Subtlety, you see Force of Negation, you see Chalice. he chose to play relics in there, and he also chose to play Kira's. So, a couple different things. Like, those cards definitely do get played in our deck. And he chose to just have a more traditional sideboard, I think. But, like, I was surprised to see, though, it was, like, fairly similar. The idea of play Dockhand, cut Silvergill, play Spreading Seas here. Very good. And he also was on 4 Cavern and 3 Mutavault, which, probably necessary to do something like this. I can't imagine, like, playing 4 Mutavault just, like, feels dangerous to me, and even with the Oboro, like, so that can help you bail you out sometimes, but I don't know. I don't like being color screwed when I'm playing, so, and it happens often enough with even 3 Mutavaults where I feel like I don't want the 4th one, but that's just my preference. So, yeah, no, this was 9th place, so congratulations on that. You ended up 6-2 with his list, so Merfolk did really well at this event, I'd say. Out of the 3 Merfolk decks, like, 2 of them had pretty winning records. I was pretty pleased with how my tournament went. It was fun. It's a good experience. I think there's something to this shell, and that we should probably be exploring playing more lists like this without Silvergill, because it really does seem like it's not necessary to the operation of the deck. So it's very possible that maybe just playing some number of Spreading Seas instead is just fine. Um, I'll probably be trying more of that. So I think that, yeah, even Nikachu had said something that he kind of like was positive on the idea of like just like splitting Gill with Seas, but like maybe this is a more convincing reason to just not have Silvergill at all. So anyway, that is how my tournament went for the 5K. So I know we tried this list on on MTGO last week, and it did not do quite that well, but my intuition seemed to be right that like that actually was the sort of list that we wanted to take into this event, and I thought it did pretty well. So and I like sharing these stories of how to like go through these tournaments. I think the response from the one I did earlier this year was pretty good. So if people like this, yeah, we'll continue doing more of them. Probably going to be going to Eternal Weekends, like 95% at this point. It'll be about a month from now. So I will be playing some Legacy between now and then in order to figure out what my 75 needs to look like for that. And then afterwards, I may be doing another one of these then. So we'll look at it. But all right, well, that's how that went. So I appreciate you guys being here and listening to me ramble on about how to prepare for this event. So I appreciate that, and I will see you again next time. Please click the thumbs up and leave some nice comments. I always like to read and respond to them. So take it easy, everybody. I'll see you again next time.
Yeah, that was good rock talk.